if someone out there is already running a podcast, or they're considering starting a podcast, or they want to level up their podcast, one thing I learned from Mark Victor Hansen was the idea of, if you want something, you got to ask for it. They're not just going to volunteer you their A-list guests, most likely. You got to ask for them. So I knew this going into shows. So what I'll typically do is I'll go and I'll research the guests coming on. And if they have like close friends that I've seen, or I know who they are, like famous folks, I'll ask them for the recommendation. When I went to Mark Victor Hansen's episode, I knew that he was friends with Michael Dell and Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey. So I wrote down those three names. And I'm prepared to ask him for referrals to those three people. And right when I'm getting ready to ask him for referrals, I said, well, Mark, I know that you wrote a book called Ask, and I know you got to put it out there if you want something. So I'm looking for referrals to these people. And he's like, oh, man, I'm so glad you came prepared. And then he gave me a bunch of referrals. So that's one barrier, glass wall, glass mirror. You got to break through people. If you want to get the big guests, you got to ask for them. You got to find a way to get to them.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of I Made a Podcast. Now we are going to get into this conversation right now with Matt Drinkahan, and his podcast is called the Eternal Optimist Podcast. It is a awesome podcast, and he's been doing it for a while, and he shared so much insight and so much wisdom in this episode. You're gonna love it. Make sure you have your notepad so that you can take notes from what he's sharing. It was so insightful, and there was a lot of things that you can learn and apply into your podcast. So let's get into this conversation with Matt right now. It was a good one, and I know that you're gonna enjoy it. Matt, how you doing today?
Oh, fantastic. January 3rd, 2025. Healthy, alive, and ready to rock and roll this year, brother. How are you?
Absolutely. I am doing great. Happy New Year to yourself and everybody out there listening. So your podcast is called the Eternal Optimist Podcast. Now, I do a little homework before I interview anyone, and I listen to a few of your episodes. So you've been doing this podcast since, I think it was 2022. I think around there is when the first episode was released. I think it was around May. But for all the people who are hearing about you for the first time, can you maybe share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, fantastic. I get to talk about me. This is amazing. Thank you for this opportunity. I love podcasting. My name is Matt Drinkahan. I'm 47. I've been married for 10 years now. I got 3 young daughters that are amazing. My wife is way out of my league, so I got lucky there. By the way, if you want to meet someone who's way out of your league, here's a good sales technique. Just keep asking. She said no 3 times, and finally I asked her out, and she said, if you stop asking me, I'll go out with you. Will you stop? And yeah, we went out, and the rest is history. So that was one little dating tip out there. You're welcome, team. But Matt Drinkahan, again, is my name, and my podcast is the Eternal Optimist Podcast. And we've been going for roughly 240 episodes so far for the past, going on 3 years. And it's been an amazing journey. I've interviewed the most successful people in business, in politics, in sports. I've interviewed the most successful people in education. I've interviewed people that literally been living on the streets for homeless for the past 20 years, and they found a way to start a business and get off the streets. I've interviewed anyone that you might consider successful, and that could be a broad range, but successful people, and I ask them all the same things. I ask them, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to endure or overcome in your life? And how'd you do it? So I like to go deep into the hard stuff pretty quick, and it has been just the most amazing thing to see people open up and share their stories. And in doing that has empowered me to be more authentic and to share my story and to be more comfortable and confident in who I am. So podcasting has done so many great things for me and for the people I've been able to serve by having them on, not to mention the listeners, some of whom have reached out to me and shared their life-changing stories. And it's been such an amazing journey. So you ask who I am, and I didn't even answer. I don't know if I answered that question. I went straight to the podcast because it's just such an outlet of energy, man. It's just been such a cool thing because you don't know necessarily what you're getting into when you get into it. And now that I'm here, man, I wouldn't change it for anything. It has done so much for my businesses, have all grown and expanded. The credibility that's come from the podcast has been amazing. We've had, I think we cracked, I'm not sure exactly the number of downloads we're getting per episode, but I know that in our first year, we got to around 20,000 downloads. And, I need to go back and look at the last year and a half. I don't remember the exact stats, but it's grown and just kept growing. And it's just been a really, really cool thing. So
wonderful.
That's my first answer. Yeah, it's been great, man.
Yeah, awesome. So this is great because I asked you about yourself, but you again you just started to talk about podcasting, and I can resonate with that as well
Yeah.
because I've been podcasting since I think it was 2018 or 19, but I love it so much that I started another one, and actually I'm a podcast producer. I help other people with their podcasts. Actually, we're in my studio right now, where I actually help people when
Nice.
they come here and do their podcasts. So I totally resonate with that. It's such an like a central point of my life, so I can totally resonate with what you're mentioning about having your own podcast. But talk to us about the name, though, the name of your podcast, the Eternal Optimist Podcast. Where did that name come from?
Yes. Great question. So it was, man, I'm going to go back in time here. The podcast launched in 2022 May. Okay. 2022 May is when the first episode goes live. So let's go back in time. 2.5 years before that. Let's go back to 2019, in the summertime of 2019. That summer, I wanted to start a podcast. And I hired a coach to help me figure out, like, what do I do? And this coach had already had a successful podcast. And in working with Joe, first thing was the title and what's it about? So I didn't know exactly. So he asked me, what do you want the title to be? I came up with a few of them. I thought my podcast was going to be Profit from Your Mistakes, because I wanted to show people that all the mistakes that you make can actually be incredibly profitable for you when you know how to learn from them. Because I'm a constant growth guy. I mean, I'm the type of person that loves, let's just say, Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, the idea of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. I'm the growth guy exemplified times 100. So I'm always looking for the way that I can learn from some challenge or learn from my seeming mistake. And here I am in the summer of 2019, and Profit from Your Mistakes. I've already drawn up a couple what I think are going to be the covers and everything. And he says, okay, what else you got? I'm like, I thought that was going to be it. I really thought that was going to be the title, Chris. And then he kept asking more questions. So I just kept throwing at him, well, here are things I like to talk about. Here is the kind of person I am. And before you know it, like the fourth thing I said, well, I'm an eternal optimist. So eternal optimism could be it. I could be the Eternal Optimist podcast. He says, oh, that's it. That was it. That was it. Said and done. And he didn't care for my Profit from Your Mistakes. So I just went with it. And now the Eternal Optimist podcast is born.
Yeah. And I love the name.
2019, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I love that. I love that name because in a world where people gravitate to negativity and and pessimism.
Yeah, they do.
But it's so refreshing, right? That if you like, when I see the name, the Eternal Optimist Podcast, that to me, it gives me the perspective of, listen, I need to try my best to continually think positive, think of the optimistic side of things rather than thinking on the pessimistic side of things and the negative side of things. I think, and so that's what I hear when I read the name of your podcast. And it actually gravitates me towards listening to your podcast because, like, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get something positive out of listening to this podcast. And so when I listen to your podcast, when I listen to the name, that's what comes to my mind when I listen to it. I don't know if have you ever gotten any feedback on the name of your podcast from anyone that you interviewed or anyone who listened?
Oh yeah, it's interesting because I remember the most positive and the most negative feedback I've gotten on most things in life, and on the podcast, the negative thing that comes to mind first is someone said, why would you have a podcast called this? You're never going to monetize this. It's a nice idea, but no one's like this. Literally, someone on my show said this to me. I'm like, okay. And I'm open to hearing feedback, so it didn't like bother me or anything. I remember that. But so many people, even before the podcast ever come up, say to me, I'm an eternal optimist. And they talk about themselves. I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk talk on his podcast. He's an eternal optimist. Michael J. Fox, who, by the way, is my dream guest for my show, right? He's an eternal optimist. He said these words before, and he is facing one of the most challenging things ever. I mean, he's got the ALS or Parkinson's, so he's not able to even really speak the way that he used to, and he's kind of gone downhill in that regard. But his mindset has always been strong. So I've been inspired by people who are able to take the hardest stuff and turn it into good. So that's where the title originally came from. But you ask, what feedback has been given, and I'd say that the majority. I mean, the last question I ask on my podcast to every guest is, what might eternal optimist mean to you? All right. So I asked everyone what it might mean to them. Right. So it's gotten some really great feedback. So the circles I'm in, it's been very positive.
Wonderful.
That's the answer.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's talk. You mentioned some of the guests and your I guess you want to call it a halo guest, the guest, your dream guest that you want to eventually interview. What was the best interview that you've ever done? So you've had a variety of guests on your podcast so far, right? So what was if you can pinpoint one specific guest, and I know you might be singling out a person by doing this, but if there was a guest that you had where the conversation was just so rich or something that you learned so much about, what was that one interview that kind of just sticks out in your mind that anyone else who's listening to you for the first time now, that's the episode that they need to go to? What episode was that?
Oh, yeah, easily. The one that comes to mind is with Brianna Greenspan. And we recorded that at the start of 2023. And Brianna, she has some health challenges, and she has some genetic health challenges. And she's an amazing person. You wouldn't know that she has any health challenges by looking at her. She's like drop dead gorgeous for one. She's super smart. She's very well spoken. She's kind of famous in her space that she's in. You wouldn't know she has any challenges, but if you know her behind the scenes, and you know that she told the story on the show that she was speaking. She's close friends with another friend of mine named Hal Elrod, who wrote the Miracle Morning book. Mm-hmm. And she's speaking with Hal on stage in New York, and she's getting ready to come out to do her speech, but she can't leave her hotel room because she's so deathly sick that day.
Wow.
And this is what part of the things are like in her life. And she tells her origin story about how she had these challenges with her spine growing up. She had to wear this brace, kind of like we saw the movie Forrest Gump with the leg braces that young Forrest wore. Well, she had a spinal brace and a neck brace. She got picked on because of it. I started to cry right there in the middle of the episode because I know a little bit about getting bullied, being kind of I'd say the teacher's pet or the big nerd growing up. Not until I got into like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and when I grew bigger than everyone else, I stopped getting picked on. So I was deeply connected with her on the bullying aspect. And I'll let the listeners go to the episode, but if you want an episode that defines our podcast, it's Brianna's, because she lives in constant chronic pain, a scale from 1 to 10, where most of us are is probably a 0 to a 3 all the time. If we have a nagging injury, she's always at like a 6 to a 9, always. She doesn't take all the medicines to make the pain go away because it numbs her mind. She doesn't want that. So amazing guest. This is the first thought that comes to mind is that one. Now, you ask that, and like any good overachiever, I have to come back and give you a second answer too, Chris. Can I do that?
Sure.
Can I show you a second episode too?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, go ahead.
Podcasting has led me on such a journey, and it's remarkable that I remember having on the show my good friend Jenny. Jenny is my neighbor at 14. She has a podcast called the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast. It's top #1 network marketing podcast of all time. And I have her on the show, and I haven't seen her in 30 years. She's a neighbor from when we were kids.
Wow.
She introduced me to Mark Victor Hansen, the Chicken Soup for the Soul book author, who sold 600 million books, more than anybody in the whole world.
Wow.
And I meet Mark. I fly out to Scottsdale to go meet him at the Waste Management Open a couple of years back. And amazing. Changed my life having a conversation with Mark. He sold 600 million books. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And then he publishes my book. And I got a copy of it right here. It's The Eternal Optimist. It's never too late. So just think about this. You're asking me my like marquee podcast episode, and Brianna comes up, but then I look at all the other like just little dots in the puzzle pieces of the podcast episodes. They've led to so many things. My book came out because I was referred to Mark Victor Hansen and met him. We had a great connection. Now he's a mentor. Right?
Wonderful.
So many things have happened. But you asked for one episode, I just said 2, and back to you, Chris.
Yeah, you know what? So this is great. So listen, this is what I'm going to do for everyone out there listening. I'm going to put the links for your podcast in the description of this episode, links for all of your social medias, and for any way that people can connect with you. Even if they want to get your book, I'm going to put links for all of those things in the description below so that they can connect with you, buy your book, listen to your podcast, and all of these episodes that you're talking about, they can go back and listen to it because they're all available going back to when you started the podcast back in May. So I'm going to do that so people can have no excuse not to listen to your podcast. Now,
thank you. I mean, I'm eternally grateful. I mean, we got 220 episodes. I mentioned my friend Hal a minute ago. I've been friends with Hal through the Front Row Dads and through Cutco for some time, but he is going to be my guest 250. I've got him recording in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking forward to that. But we've got
Excellent.
a whole plethora, a wide spectrum of guests.
So
So please feel free to check it out if you're looking for something around someone overcoming the suicide of their kids. We've got that. Overcoming all types of drug addiction, of every type of drug, every type of addiction. We've got that. Gambling addiction. We've got that. Someone who has low self-esteem, who feels like they're just their life, they're living someone else's dream, and they do a complete 360 change in everything they do. We got that. We've everything you can imagine. We've got people overcoming stuff, and it was just amazing to experience it all.
yeah, so that's perfect segue into my next question, right? Because like I said to you before, I've listened to a few of your episodes. There was an episode that I listened. Now the names of the people that you were speaking to, I can't remember, but I remember the stories. There was someone you were speaking to whose I think daughter passed away. I think it was in November.
Amy,
yeah,
Amy Post. That's one of the ones that came to mind as most impactful on me because I was crying with Amy in that one. Man,
yeah,
I was
great
crying with her
episode.
on that one.
And there was another episode that you released last week with an individual who was attempting to climb a mountain on every continent.
Yeah,
and I was listening to that episode, and I'm listening to all of these episodes that you did, and there was such a wide variety of guests. So my question to you is, like, how do you find these guests for your podcast to have these amazing, impactful stories? How do you find guests to come on your podcast?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you just step by step how I built the podcast and start with the way that I got my first guest. The first guest came from what I call my initial list. So I sat down, looked at my cell phone, looked at all my social media connections, and like, who do I feel comfortable enough to ask to come be on the show? And I looked at all the people I knew, and I was like, yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with some. There were some people that I know pretty well that are pretty famous that, honestly, I didn't ask them first. Like Hal, for example. I didn't want to ask him first. I was nervous asking John Berghoff, who was guest one on my show, 250 episodes in, and John was guest one. I was nervous asking him. But I started with my initial list of people. And when I connect with a guest, like, you're really easy for me to talk to. I'm going to call you one of my preferred platform podcast hosts. I'm going to refer everyone to you if you want that. It's really easy to make an authentic, genuine connection. When you feel it, you feel it. So when I felt that with people, I don't feel it every guest, but when I feel that with guest Chris, I asked them for referrals. I asked him, who are the top 2 people you can think of that would be open for being on the show, or at least people you could approach about being on the show. Right? Mm-hmm. All they got to do is speak English and tell a real, authentic story. Mm-hmm. It'd be nice if they have 1 million followers. All right, that's not required though. Real, authentic, great person, just got a story. That's what I'm searching for. All right, so that's pretty much how I frame it. And there are a group of people, like we have Rena introduced us, the host of the Better Call Daddy podcast. I send everyone to her if she wants them because I love Rena. She's been amazing to me, and I love being on her show. So I get guests from other podcast hosts. I ask referrals from the guests that I have that were absolutely amazing. So if you look at it like that, I always have a large pipeline of people, right? Mm-hmm. I've actually had to slow it down a little bit recently. I've actually had to share with the people, instead of just sending me guests directly, send me like a clip or a couple of bullet points of their speaking when you call them speaking somewhere on social media or somewhere, because there's been so many people who want to be on the show. So it actually picks up a life of its own after a while. That probably took like 100, 180 episodes or so. Now I've got more guests I know what to do with. So it took 180 episodes to get to that overflow of guests, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
Is that what you were asking?
So let me just try to summarize. So you've been guest on other people's podcasts, and that's one way that you get guests on your podcast, and also through referrals through other people that you have connections with. To kind of summarize.
Yes. Originally, it started with people that I know, and then I eventually got referrals from them. And then as my business is, we haven't even talked about my business. I'm not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about the podcast. But on the other side of things, podcast is a small like tentacle of like the mothership of my main brand, my main business. And in running that and growing that, what I found is that my marketing team said, Matt, go be on podcasts. This was 2 years ago. So I went and guested on like 80 or 90 podcasts in about a 3 or 4 month span. And, got the name out there, got the brand out there a bunch. So I from there, podcast hosts know other podcast hosts. We're a community that we know which ones you like. We know which ones are just And I have the ones I like, and I give them guests. They give me guests. So it's been easy now to find guests.
Right.
I guess that's what I want to say now.
I think that is a very important takeaway for all of the other podcasters. So for everyone else out there listening, if you're kind of new to podcasting and trying to get into it, try to be guests on other people's podcasts. Make yourself available to be on other people's podcasts and build connections and relationships with these people. And hopefully, over the course of time, they'll introduce you to more people, and then your network will just grow. So this is, I think, one of the strategies that all newer podcasters should try. Be a guest on someone else's podcast, add value to them, and help them with their podcast, and eventually, your podcast will grow as well. And so how much episodes are we up to now? I think 200 and something episodes. I think you were saying, Matt.
Yeah, I think we're like 230, 240. I've got 245 in the bank, meaning I've got some that are kind of in the queue, ready to go. But I think we're right around that number somewhere. So I think you're on a really important topic, and I went to my shelf to grab something that I think is super important. Mm-hmm. I got this book called Ask, and it's a bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. It was written by Mark Victor Hansen. It's not one of the chicken soup books; it's one of his newer brand of books, Ask. And the idea of if someone out there is already running a podcast, or they're considering starting a podcast, or they want to level up their podcast, one thing I learned from Mark Victor Hansen was the idea of if you want something, you got to ask for it. They're not just going to volunteer you their A-list guests, most likely. You got to ask for them. So I knew this going into shows. So what I'll typically do is I'll go and I'll research the guests coming on. And it's really simple. I'll just go and Google them, or I'll go and see what company they're a part of, what pictures are on their social media. And if they have like close friends that I've seen, or I know who they are, like famous folks, I'll ask them for the recommendation. When I went to Mark Victor Hansen's episode, I knew that he was friends with Michael Dell and Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey. So I wrote down those three names, and I'm prepared to ask him for referrals to those three people who are like worldwide names of business moguls, right? And right when I'm getting ready to ask him for referrals, I said, well, Mark, I know that you wrote a book called Ask, and I know you got to put it out there if you want something. So I'm looking for referrals to these people. And he's like, oh, man, I'm so glad you came prepared. And then he gave me a bunch of referrals. So it was great. But I wanted to put that point out there, is if you want it, you got to ask for it. They're not just going to show up, so that's one barrier, glass wall, glass mirror. You got to break through people. If you want to get the big guests, you got to ask for them. You got to find a way to get to them.
That's so awesome. And I think this is why the people come here to this podcast, to get insights like that. So you got to ask for what you want. So that book, it's called Ask by Mark Victor Hansen. Again, I'm going to make some notes on this episode. Screenshots. I'm going to put all those things. So if anyone listening out there, this is a book that you might want to read, Ask. And it's like you knew my questions. I didn't give you the specific questions beforehand, but it's like everything you're saying is kind of setting you up for the next question that I was going to ask you. What I was going to ask is how you prepare for interviews, because you have a whole bunch of clients or people that you interview on your podcast who have different life stories, so it's not always the same type of people that you're interviewing. How do you prepare?
Yes.
How do you, what kind of homework do you do? You alluded to it a little bit there, right? That you do some pre-work before you interview someone. But how do you prepare for these interviews?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll say that I prepare with a lot of intention and follow through. Yeah. Right? Because I run a sizable business over here with my full-time business. So I'm heavily focused on that. So I come over to the podcasting where I've got 3 slots a week that are scheduled in my calendar. And on an ideal week, I've had one of my executive assistants go and find all they can about the person. Sometimes the guests come with their own press packet, and about, I'd say 10% of the time I get a press packet from a guest, and it has like their one page of their picture, the bullet point highlights of their career, the talking points and questions to ask them. So some of them come really prepared with that. So with those, I've got the sheet and I can review it for about 10 minutes before the podcast. If I don't have that, then I've got something else. I have a Google intake form. I send it to every single person. it has a number of questions on it. And one of them is, what do you love talking about? What is it you don't want to talk about? What are the most challenging moments that we can bring up and talk about today? What are all your social media places that we can promote you? Are you willing to promote our podcast too? And what's your address so I can send you a small gift token of our appreciation? Something like that. I think those are the questions on the intake form. So we got the intake form as one. Some of these people send me their own press packet as two. And recently, like in the last year, I've been getting pitched by a bunch of PR agencies and marketing firms that are sending me just trying to get their people on my show. It's how I met Sunira, the first billion-dollar unicorn. She's a Pakistani American woman who founded and brought to life with her brother a multi-billion-dollar company out of nothing after nobody would buy it and everyone said no to her. And wow. I'd never heard of her. Florida's first billion-dollar unicorn woman of Pakistani American descent, amazing woman. She's a little bit younger than me with young kids, just amazing woman. And she got pitched to me by a marketing service, right? So just looking at it, I've got press packets, I've got marketing companies now pitching me. And when I was brand new and just getting started, it was a Google intake form. And I go and take whatever they share with me. And I go down the rabbit hole of their website for like 10 minutes or so and figure stuff out. Mm-hmm. Generally, I've kind of set the system here, Chris, so that if I want to, I can take some time and go down the rabbit hole and deeply research a client or deeply research the podcast guest. That might take me 10 to 30 minutes, right? In addition to that, if I'm running behind a little bit and I've still got basically the same 4 questions I ask everybody, right? And if I didn't do any research at all, I could just ask the first question, who is Chris Creary? That's the first question. Who is that person? And some people have a very difficult time with that question, but they'll give me the stuff I can start asking them more questions about as time goes on, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm fully prepared, I put 10 to 30 minutes into it. I got a press packet or an intake form or something I can look at, and I've been to their websites. If I'm flying by the seat of my pants, which frankly is probably about 15 to 20% of the time when I'm doing podcasts, I will take about 5 minutes before the podcast. I'll go to their website, go to their social media, and then I will let the answers they give me in the questions dictate where I take the conversation from there. But I ask the same 4 questions of everybody. So I've gotten comfortable and aware of the right types of questions that get a great response from people. I ask, who is them? Like, who is Chris Creary, right? Number one. Number 2, what's the most challenging or difficult thing you ever had to overcome or endure in your life? That normally gets an interesting answer. And then from there, at some point, I'll ask them, well, now that you've shared the challenges, where is it that you're taking and pouring your energy now in your world? And through those 3 questions, I have ample opportunity to gather and fact find and discover while I'm on the podcast.
Yeah, so this is great. So
is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So there's a few things. So there's a few things that can be done beforehand. So you said that you could get a press packet from the guest. You also proactively you have a Google intake form where they can fill out information that can help you in determining how the conversation will go or what types of questions that you ask. The PR companies can approach you, or you can just do some research 10 to 30 minutes beforehand, check out their social media, their website, and just to familiarize yourself with who the person is that you're dealing with. But ideally, you have 4 core questions. And then out of those 4 core questions, you basically can ask probing questions or follow-up questions based on their responses, right? So in a nutshell, that's basically your process when you do it, right? So this is great. This is exactly what I wanted to get to.
Let's keep getting to it because I've got some more stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go down the rabbit hole a little bit deeper for your guests, or for your listeners. So check this out. So we're talking about how I research them. Well, let me share with you, before I do any research on them, I frame the introduction to them in a very certain way. So let's say that we finish our podcast today, and I say to you, Chris, I had a great time, and genuinely, I actually am having a great time, and I'm looking forward to asking you for referrals to other people, and I'll offer some as well. Sure. But I would normally ask them for the referral, and I ask them, what's the best way for you to tee it up? Is it you just to ask them first, or is it, they're your friend, just put it together in a 3-way email or text and tee up the podcast? I mean, what is it? What's the best way? So they normally say they will email their friend and me together in 3-way email and connect us. At that point, I have a form email that's ready. All I got to do is just click insert that email signature, and the signature is the entire email. And it has in it the intake form, the booking link, and here's the question I'm going to ask you. Here's what the podcast is about. So they already know about what I'm going to ask them. So even if they have like this big, long resume or whatever, they know that this is what we're talking about. All right. So that actually gets me off the hook for not having to go and do a lot of research. When I was a brand new podcaster, and it took me, I would say my podcast episodes go for about 35 to 55 minutes of recording time. And then we got 5 or 10 minutes on the front and back end of just talking to each other. So I'm in for 75 minutes. For every episode is a 35-minute block of time. And what slowed me down, the hardest thing for me in the beginning, is that I wanted to have the perfect intro. So I would go and listen. I'd go and record the conversation. I'd make notes as I'm going along in the conversation. I'd come back, and then after the conversation's over, I would go and create a recording to introduce the person. And I would read off their life highlights and read off some of the things we're going to talk about in the show. And that slowed me down so much. That slowed me down. My perfectionism got the best of me. I wanted to be so ideal. This is not my full-time career gig. I'm not getting paid to do this. It's not something I've chosen to monetize yet because I don't want any sponsors unless I truly believe in the product and use the product.
Right.
Like Milk, for example, the organic almond milk company of Texas. I love that company, and I'm considering having them as a sponsor. But in any event, I frame it to the guest that here are the questions, here's this. So they got that. And when they come on, typically they already know everything I'm going to ask. We build rapport for a few minutes. I try to make it light. I take some inspiration from watching Joe Rogan on his show, and having hear him talk about how he does his show beforehand. They're over there just talking, getting to know each other for a little bit. And there's been countless studies on it. It's like the #1 podcast in the country. So, I've studied the studies. I want to build a little bit of rapport and lighten the mood a little bit, because some people come in tense, and they come in, if they haven't been on many shows yet, they're a little bit nervous themselves. They're kind of in a boxy, very logical mindset. So I want to open up with some jokes and some charisma, personality, and get them comfortable first, right? Exactly. And then sometimes they give me some really good ammunition in that first few minutes, right? So anyways, I'll stop now. But those are some more granular details around the logistics of getting the thing set up and then having the conversation.
Absolutely. Now, this is perfect. This is what I wanted to get to, right? Because again, this podcast is all about helping podcasters shorten that learning curve. And a lot of podcasters that are new out there are interviewing people, but they don't know how to prepare, don't know what to do. I've seen interviews with other podcasters where one person is interviewing someone else and they both just feel like they're, all tense. Their shoulders are up like this. And you're like, okay, so let's move on to the next question now. I'm going to ask you, and they sound robotic. And so the
I
flow,
know,
the
man.
way that people
those are like nails on a chalkboard.
Exactly. And it's hard to listen to.
Those are tough.
It's hard to listen to. But so the skill, like the pre-work before, like the pre-5 minute, meeting before you hit the record button to loosen up the mood and kind of reviewing your questions to make sure things have a nice light flow to it. I think all of those things are extremely important so that when listeners hear it, they don't hear the tenseness, right? Because the person that you're interviewing, this might be their first time, being on the interview. So rightfully so, they might be nervous.
Yeah.
You, as the host, you need to, the host needs to be able to allow that person feel comfortable and feel themselves so that when they're speaking, it will just flow and there's no kind of nervousness or anything in it, because people who are listening can actually feel that and through the audio as they're listening to the podcast.
You're spot on, my friend. Spot on. And those, just so you know, out there listening, those are some of the most challenging episodes to record, is when you have someone who's a rookie at it and they're a little bit nervous. And, you know what, maybe I'm kind of in a hurry, or I'm behind for the day. So we get started and I forgot to just pause and connect with this person and make it a little bit easier for them and for me and build that connection. That is so, in my opinion, that is so crucial on the front end, to not just go straight into talking points. I've been interviewed on television sometimes for my companies. And I tell you, that stuff is so robotic. Like they tell you got 3 minutes here. We're going to take 30 seconds for the actual part on TV. So have your 3 points ready to go. And I get some people, like I've gotten a couple of politicians on, and they will not veer off script. They will not go personal. They won't go authentic. And, everything is a spin. And I'm looking for authentic. So I've gotten good at being able to weed out and filter and get the guests that'll tell a real story. But man, if you're a listener and you're thinking of starting a host, or you already have a podcast, you'll get through that. Get better with your skill at filtering through and qualifying your guests, and you'll be able to get to a place where you don't have that. You've got to get better, and you got to get better qualifying and filtering guests. That's the bottom line to make it in this, and then keep enjoying it.
Exactly.
Okay,
let's move on to this question here. When you've been doing it for since 2022, what were some of the challenges that you have faced when you started out that you've overcome now, or something that like an ongoing challenge that you maybe see right now as a podcaster?
Yeah. Two of them come to mind immediately. You go back in time in this conversation, I share with you that I hired a coach to help me build my podcast in the summer of 2019. That's the summer of 2019. I launched in nearly the summer of 2022. So I hired someone and paid them good money to coach me on how to do this. And I still sat on the bench for 2 years and 10 months. 2 years and 10 months later is when I launched. All right, so consider that. How many times in our lives, my friends, have we thought about we wanted to do something and we hesitated? And I hesitated. That was number one, is I didn't take action. And I didn't take action because I didn't know a couple things. I thought I could do it myself. And here's where I was stuck. One little thing, tiniest of things, Chris. I didn't know how to take my recording, which I can talk, no problem. I can talk to people. I can do that, no problem. I didn't know how to take the recording and make it into something that can go to the Apple or to the Google or to the Amazon or wherever you've got to go to send these files to have the recording actually play. I know anything about that. Right. And you can Google that and teach yourself how to do that if you want to. And I always had that on my to-do list, but it was never a priority at the top of the list. So it never got done until I made a decision to put my money where my mouth is. Because when I put money into it, I know I'm going to do something with it because I don't want to waste money. Right. So I hired the podcast production company before I'd ever actually interviewed anybody. And I said, I'm going to pay you to produce this podcast. And I'm really good at talking and I can get guests, but everything else I need you to do. How much is that going to cost me? And what do you offer? Right. So this is the way I approach it. I interviewed 3 companies to, produce and host and do all the stuff, the editing, all the things I don't know how, don't want to do. I hired someone to do that. And I got a variety of offers. One guy wanted me to pay him $30,000 a year, $2,500 a month to do do one episode a week that he would release. And where I settled right now, that was the highest one. The one I work with now is Amplified Media, and I love them. They've been great to me for the last 2.5 years. But I hired them, and they produce 2 episodes a week for me. They run my YouTube channel. They run all my social media clips. They take the feed, and they send everything to RSS feed. That's the word, by the way, RSS feed. I still don't know what the heck it means, but they do all the technical things behind the scenes I didn't take the time to learn how to do. So that is going to be roughly for me, because I don't want to do the editing. For me, I pay them, that's about $9,000 a year. All right. So you want some real numbers? That's a real number. And another real number is the amount of time that I've spent on editing is 0. Right. Yeah. I was stuck. I didn't know how to edit, didn't know how to do RSS feed. And I figured that, I've got to get the stuff that's I'm procrastinating around, which means stuff I'm not inspired to do. I don't want to do. I got to pay someone to do that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, though. So the parts that were challenging to you, you actually found. So you found someone else to do those hard parts, and it's interesting.
Oh yeah.
You said so much things there that actually resonate with me. The procrastination part of it, that was me too. I had the idea to start my podcast. I think it was 2015 or 2016.
Okay.
My background is I used to produce music. So the microphone, the computers and everything, I had everything there to have a podcast. But I procrastinated so long. And actually what I did was I said, okay, you know what? If I don't start to do something, I'm never going to start. So I actually purchased like the hosting and I started to pay for it, even though I didn't have a podcast recorded, didn't have nothing. And I sat on it for a month and I didn't do anything. But then I looked at my credit card statements and I saw that the hosting cost was coming out. And just like you, when you say that you have to put your money where your mouth is and you don't like to waste money, I saw it after that first month when I saw it on my credit card bill that the hosting cost came on my credit card. I said, you know what? I don't want to waste this money next month. I got to do something about it. So by the next month, I started to put some practical work together to learn the things that I needed to learn to do it. And then the following month after that is when I actually launched the podcast, right? So for me, the way that I tricked myself into starting the podcast was to purchase the hosting and see that amount come off of my credit card every single month. And it actually motivated me to start the podcast. But procrastination is a real hindrance to a lot of people who are trying to start podcasts. I think that's a big one that I hear a lot about. And then also you mentioned the technical part of it as well. So myself, coming from like a audio background, music production background, and now producing podcasts, that's actually what I do. So the companies that you work with is something that I do for some of my other clients, where they just sit down and they love to talk and they will record their audio and they'll be like, okay, I don't want to do anything else. So here, Chris, I just drop the file into the folder. You can do what you got to do and let me know. And they pay me to produce the podcast for them and then send it back to them or upload it to, and then they don't need to do anything else and they have the finished version. So there's actually no excuse. If you have the thought or the idea to start a podcast, right, you can either trick yourself into learning how to do it like how I did it, or do what you do, hire someone, if you have the financial means to hire someone to go out and create the podcast for you. So thank you for the answer. I just wanted to give my 2 cents there too, because I feel that that's a big stumbling point for a lot of podcasters, the procrastination and the technical limitations or the technical knowledge gap with starting a podcast. But if you're motivated to start, there's actually no excuse. I don't know. Do you have anything else that you want to add on that point?
Yeah, I think those were two, those were foundational. Those are macro giant challenges for a lot of people. A couple of smaller, micro challenges that you'll come up along the way that have been frustrating altogether, though they're stuff out of our control. One is every once in a while, the technology will kind of go wonky on me. I remember when Hurricane Helene came through and it was devastating here in North Carolina about 2.5 months ago. So heart goes out to all the families that are still struggling over there. That was a tough time. But what was challenging to be a podcaster at that time is that the internet went down in our city around parts of the town for 3 days. And my Spectrum, which is the major service provider down here, they had a person come out to our house and look at it. And we had 2 different trenches dug in our backyard, and they've been trying to get it right ever since, and it hasn't worked since. So I've since switched my internet provider to a wireless T-Mobile, and it's challenging to do the podcast. It's why today I'm here on my AirPods instead of this really nice, expensive, badass microphone I got right here, because my internet is too glitchy for me to risk using just everything internet. So that is one thing out of our control. That's a challenge. It's a small one, but still, it's something. And the second thing, I hesitated before sharing this, but it's something. I don't want this to deter anyone from podcasting. It was a challenging, frustrating, just out of the blue, this happened. I got a message one day from YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, that I am providing hateful content and I'm providing misinformation. I got deplatformed. And I'm like, what? This is the stuff that happens to other people. I'm like, what? Really? So I went to look at the complaint, and it was so vague. It wouldn't tell me anything specific about what the complaint was. And I look at the guest. The guest is a world-renowned doctor, and he made a couple comments that may have been contrary to what the narrative was in the COVID establishment at the time. And before you know it, I'm deplatformed. And there's no one you can talk to. There's not a person you can get on the actual phone. You can only get people through email and don't respond quickly. So it's very frustrating, and you want to give up. So that was one challenge that I dealt with recently, about 1.5 years ago, when I had a famous doctor come on the show. And that was something. So those are 2 kind of micro, smaller challenges, I'd say. I say they were smaller because the technology is out of your control, and I can choose not to ask questions about controversial subjects like COVID if I want to.
Absolutely.
But I think those were some some things in the moment that I didn't understand that kind of upset me. I'm past that now. So those are a couple things. Yeah.
So let's wrap this up now. This is how I usually end every single episode of I Made a Podcast. Do you have any final pieces of advice for anybody who's starting a podcast? And if there's anything I forgot to ask you that you feel like you want to share, you can share it as well.
Oh, wow. How much more time? No.
Well, it's totally up to you.
First thing that comes to mind, man, I say this, is that I hear from so many podcasters when they get started, they feel sometimes like an imposter, like, I don't know if I can do this. Other people, what am I going to talk about? You're never going to know until you're in the arena. Give it your best shot and get in the arena and give it a try. If you're where you feel exposed and like, I don't know if I'm going to know what to talk about, just try. Just try. You can even go to AI nowadays. You can ask AI, if I'm nervous about this, what are the top 15 podcast questions I can ask? If I'm on a podcast, I run it like this, I want to ask some questions, go have AI feed you questions. There are ways that you can overcome the stuff, but none of that matters until you get in the arena. Get in the arena, my friends. And if that means one step forward today is coming up with a name for your show, great. One step forward next month is figuring out who your first 10 guests are going to be, great. If it takes you some time, that's fine. But have small steps that you can follow to get yourself on the air if you're looking to start. Now, if you're already here and you want to keep expanding, then just like anything, the heliotropic effect from the sun, anything grows towards the sun when it's shining. So I'm wondering, what is it that is your main vision, mission, purpose of your show? If it's just kind of dwindling, just treading water, I might invest or look at yourself a podcast coach if you want to have a resurgence in your show. If you never had a big start to begin with, then hire someone to help you have a big start. And if you don't have the financial resources to do any of that, okay, again, back to AI and have AI use it. But you've got to get in the game. My podcast, the Eternal Optimist podcast, is about hope, and you can do it too. And my friends, anyone can do it. You've got to get in the game. So make 2025 the year that you get in the game. That'd be my thought.
I love it. Love it. Yes, you won't get in the game if you're just sitting on the bench. So you got to start doing something and take some sort of steps towards achieving your vision. So Matt, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This was an awesome conversation. My cup is full. Like, you filled me with so much knowledge and insight through your journey in podcasting. And I'm sure other people out there listening right now learned a lot from this conversation that we had. So again, the podcast is called the Eternal Optimist Podcast. I made it easy for everyone, Matt. All of the links for your socials and everything else for your books that you mentioned, the notes are down in the comments so people can go listen to your podcast. Thank you very much for being on the podcast today. And we'll connect and we'll do something else maybe in the future. So thanks very much, Matt.
It's been a real pleasure, brother. Thank you so much. And dear listeners, keep listening and God bless.
So that's it for this episode of I Made a Podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation that we had with Matt, and I hope that you learned a lot because he shared a lot of great insights with us. Now, I want to remind you about my podcasting cheat sheet. It's a list of tools that I have used that are absolutely free, and you can use them and get good quality sounding podcasts. It can help you do any part of the podcasting process, whether it is short clips, whether it is cleaning up audio, automation, transcripts. I have a long list of tools, software, and hardware that you can download and that you can get. That's it for this episode of I Made a Podcast. Remember, the best time to start a podcast was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. So go ahead and make it happen. And you'll hear from me again next week on I Made a Podcast. Peace.